Joining me now to weigh in from New York City, America's accountant Dan Geltrude. Dan, we have exhausted the line of the definition of recession. You know, the economists saying, oh, you know, it looks like we're heading that way. No, we're in one. Moving on, the Federal Reserve wants to hike interest rates possibly another 75 basis points. How much longer can they keep doing this? How much longer can they just keep raising the interest rate and raising the interest rate before everything, the house of cards, just collapses?
Well, I think it's the Fed's intent to continue to raise interest rates until they hit their target inflation rate, which is around 2%. Now, we have a long way to go to get there, which means if they're going to follow through on what they've been saying, then they're going to continue to raise interest rates through next year and possibly beyond that. So what is the impact of that? Well, the impact of that and the intention of that is to take down demand, because if you lower demand, in theory, prices will come down. And that is true. I mean, it's a basic formula. The question is, what are the consequences of doing that? So when you're raising the interest rates like that, it becomes more expensive for businesses that rely on debt and financing in order to be able to stay in business and produce products. So those costs generally will get passed along. So I don't think this is just some easy step to take. Hey, we're just going to raise the interest rates, magically inflation's going to come down, and then we'll be back to good. That's the furthest thing from the truth, Addison.
Now, Dan, you are America's accountant, so we've got to talk a little bit about the IRS. This is from The Hill. It says the IRS could be on the verge of changing the way Americans file their taxes. While most of the $80 billion for the IRS in the Inflation Reduction Act goes out over the next decade, the agency only has about a year to turn in its e-filing report. Specifically, the agency has to figure out how much an online fitting system would cost, the design of the system, and how taxpayers would feel about using one. Dan, how do you think taxpayers would feel about using one?
Probably not great, because they're going to feel ultimately it's intrusive, of which it is. I mean, basically, we're talking about, do you want the IRS to file your tax return? That's the question that we have to ask. And what the IRS is really looking at here is there a way to actually move towards not having a tax return filed, which means that all of your taxes are paid through withholdings, all the information is already with the IRS, and therefore all the information comes together and your tax return, or the tax owed, tax due, is already calculated. I think that that's virtually impossible, and the reason for that is our tax code is just too complex. So unless there's going to be steps to simplify the code, and I mean super simplify, I don't see how this is going to happen. Now, the IRS is providing a free tax preparation services, but even if it's free for those in the lower income levels, people still aren't using it. Why? Because they don't trust the IRS.
Yeah, very generous of the armed agents to offer a free service that will help them audit the living hell out of everyday Americans. Very kind and charitable of the IRS, Dan. One more thing that I want to get to. This is from Fox Business. Apple workers push back against a return to office plan. Apple corporate is going to require their employees to return to the office 3 days a week starting next month in September. Now, the employees are very upset about this, Dan. They're saying all sorts of things. They don't want to go back into the office. 3 days per week is all you're being asked to do. It would seem these Apple employees are a bit lazy.
I don't know if I would say they're lazy. Look, if they prefer to work at home, that's great. But here's what it comes down to. In the market that we've been in the job market, employers have been pretty desperate to be able to have workers, period. Employees, good employees specifically, are hard to come by. So employers have been a little bit timid about forcing employees' hands to come back to work. Now, as the economy is slowing, and I'm going to say, and we're in a recession, now you have a shift where some of the leverage is moving towards employers. So now an employer such as Apple says, hey, you got to come into the office 3 days a week. If you don't, go get a job somewhere else. If the employee can get a job, they'll leave. If they can't, they'll have to accept it. And look no further than what Elon Musk has done, right? With Tesla, he said, hey, you got to be in the office working 40 hours a week.
Yeah.
Now, if people leave or they don't leave, up to them.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to weed out who's going to be loyal and the most productive to your company at the very least. Dan Geltrude, America's Accountant, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you.
Thanks, Addison.